They told you the lake was peaceful, quiet, safe, a haven from the chaos of the world. But the truth is, silence often hides the loudest secrets. Because what happened on the shores of Silver Pine Lake wasn't just a feud with a nosy neighbor. It was a collision with a system far older and far more corrupt than anyone dared to admit. When I moved into the cabin my uncle left me, I thought I was stepping into solitude, a place to breathe, rebuild, escape. But within hours, I discovered the most dangerous thing wasn't the forest or the wildlife. It was the institution that believed it owned it all. You see, Carol Peaton didn't just call the cops because of a moving truck. She did it to assert control. Because in communities like this, HOA leaders don't see themselves as volunteers. They believe they are sovereign rulers. Little tyrants with clipboards. And while most people laugh off the idea of an HOA as just annoying, they don't realize this is where authoritarianism begins. Not with governments, but with local enforcers given a taste of unchecked power. Carol came armed with bylaws written in Comic Sans, but behind her smile was something older. A blueprint for dominance. She called my sandwich a health hazard. She fined me for footsteps. But that was just theater. The real show was hidden in plain sight. A systematic takeover of land, power, and identity. My uncle's cabin, untouched by HOA law, was a threat. Not because it was illegal, but because it was free. And freedom terrifies tyrants. This isn't just a story about a woman in a pink visor. This is about how institutions use minor rules to wage psychological warfare, to make you doubt your rights, to make you comply, even when you know you're right. What if I told you Carol wasn't the mastermind? What if her HOA was just a franchise of a deeper, older system, a test site for behavioral control? Stick. They never needed walls. Control doesn't require chains when they can get you to build the prison yourself. The Homeowners Association model wasn't created to protect property values. It was engineered to normalize surveillance, enforce conformity, and test the limits of psychological obedience. Starting with your front lawn. In Lakeshore Estates, Carol Peaton was just the latest vessel in a lineage of petty dictators. But understand this, the system made her. It didn't matter that her rules were absurd, that she fined residents for bird feeders, kayak colors, or so-called unapproved laughter during community events. What mattered was that people complied, that they bent the knee again and again until they forgot how to stand. This is how institutional manipulation hides in plain sight. It cloaks itself in civility, in community standards. But beneath that soft language lies the real agenda, obedience. Let me ask you something. How many times have you swallowed your voice to avoid making waves? How often do you follow rules you never agreed to, just to keep the peace? That's not peace. That's surrender. By the third day at the cabin, I saw it. Carol's clipboard wasn't a joke. It was a weapon. Her committee? A deputized surveillance unit. They documented every movement I made, not because I was a threat to them, but because I was a threat to the illusion of their control. The HOA wasn't just enforcing regulations. It was testing thresholds. Could they dictate how long my dock extended, the color of my trash can, the tone of my voice when I addressed her? The moment you accept one irrational rule, the next one gets easier. Until you're not just playing along, you're lost in it. And this didn't begin at the lake. HOAs began as suburban fortresses after World War II, born from racial redlining and control fantasies of the emerging managerial class. There's a reason these lakefront communities feel timeless. A reason the rules seem arbitrary, yet strangely ritualistic. They weren't designed for fairness. They were designed for hierarchy, for dominion, for inheritance of power hidden beneath the language of bylaws and beautification. When I sat down with those county land records, I didn't expect to find what I did. Not just zoning violations. Not just land theft. But something older, a pattern. Carol's HOA had slowly, strategically expanded its reach over decades, creeping into unclaimed lakefront, absorbing public land, then rewriting the map to pretend it had always been theirs. Each new rule wasn't random. It was a sigil, an attempt to reshape reality, not with spells, but with paperwork. And here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. Bureaucracy is a form of dark magic. Think about it. A few signatures on the right forms can strip you of rights you were born with. A stamp, a seal, a notice of violation. These are the modern curses, dressed in legal language, but backed by psychological fear and social exile. The HOA system is the microcosm of every empire that ever ruled unjustly, but perfected for suburbia, ritualistic compliance. Surveillance disguised as community. Ostracization disguised as order. They don't need swords when they have silence. And Carol? She didn't just inherit power, she studied it. I found emails detailing her obsession with preemptive enforcement. She called it civic dominance through conditioning. She wrote about testing homeowner tolerance thresholds like a lab rat experiment. But what shook me was one phrase she used again and again: Operation Total Lake Control, not policy, not safety. Control. She knew her HOA wasn't legal over my cabin, but that wasn't the point. The point was to make me act like it was, to believe in her authority even when I knew better. The war didn't start with sirens. It started with silence. Every rule Carol enforced, every fine she issued, every watchful eye stationed at my property line. They weren't acts of governance. They were acts of warfare. Low-grade psychological warfare waged in peacetime, designed to wear you down until you forget you're a target. But I didn't break. I watched back. And what I found was staggering. The so-called private beach the HOA bragged about in their glossy newsletters, built illegally on protected shoreline, their boat launch, extended beyond code into state-monitored wetlands, the hiking trail, carved through land they never owned. But the deeper rot, it wasn't environmental. It was deliberate institutional deception. A digital trail of emails between Carol and past board members detailed their strategy: harass any non-member landowner until they either sell or submit. They called it precedent engineering, a psychological campaign to fabricate authority, one manipulated victim at a time. You see, this wasn't incompetence. It was doctrine. And here's where it gets darker. These tactics didn't originate in suburbia. The entire HOA framework was modeled after Cold War behavioral control programs. Think about it: surveillance, social pressure, punitive isolation. These weren't policies. They were tools of compliance, tested on the enemy, refined for the public. You were never meant to fight back. You were meant to internalize the war, to police yourself, to hand over your sovereignty in exchange for peace and order. But peace bought through fear is not peace. It's a soft cage. And I decided I would rather burn down the entire facade than live one more day pretending it was real. So I made calls. I contacted the Environmental Protection Agency, the county commissioner, the Public Access Task Force. I submitted everything: emails, maps, recordings. They thought I wouldn't show up. The emergency HOA meeting was meant to be a quiet execution, a chance for Carol to cement the narrative that I was the problem, the outsider, the agitator. She had ruled this place unchallenged for years, built a kingdom of fear in pastel colors and passive-aggressive memos. But I walked into that clubhouse not as a neighbor. I walked in as a reckoning. The air was thick with tension, stifling, like the moment before a storm breaks. Residents sat with crossed arms and tightened jaws, unsure whether to believe the woman who fined them into silence, or the man who had exposed the cracks beneath their feet. Carol took the podium with her usual flair, her voice smooth, weaponized with false concern. She painted me as a disruptor, a man unwilling to integrate into community values. She spoke of order, of tradition, of protecting the aesthetic integrity of the lake. But I didn't flinch. Because truth has a weight to it, and when you carry it into a room built on lies, the room bends. I asked to speak. Carol refused. But the board treasurer, a man I had never spoken to before, looked me in the eye and said, "Let him." I stepped forward, and one by one, I handed out evidence. Legal surveys. Environmental reports. Emails from Carol herself, openly discussing coercion tactics against non-member homeowners. The room shifted. You could feel it, a cold awareness rippling across every seat. They weren't witnessing a disagreement. They were witnessing a reveal. Then the stories began. An elderly couple who had paid over $2,000 in false citations for their grandson's treehouse. A single mother fined for emotional disturbance because her toddler cried during dinner on the porch. A veteran shamed for flying a flag Carol hadn't pre-approved. The dam broke. What had been isolated shame became collective rage. Not loud. Not vio. They say tyrants fall in silence. But Carol didn't go quietly. When the judge handed down the ruling, banning the Lakeshore Estates HOA from claiming any authority beyond their legally deeded land, Carol rose from her chair like a woman possessed. Her fists clenched, her voice cracked. She screamed that she was the HOA, that this was her lake, that I had ruined everything she'd built. But she didn't build a community. She built a kingdom of fear. And when that kingdom fell, it echoed. The The state fined the HOA $175,000 for environmental violations. They were ordered to dismantle their illegal structures, restore the protected shoreline, and open public access to the waterfront they'd stolen. But the final blow. The judge barred Carol from holding any HOA position for 10 years. Her visor hit the courtroom floor like a fallen crown. What matters most about that moment isn't the justice. It's what it revealed. You see, Carol wasn't special. She was a node in something bigger, a living symptom of a system that feeds on quiet submission. She believed her authority was absolute because the system told her it was. She wasn't leading. She was mirroring. And this is the part they don't want you to see. Across the country, thousands of tiny dictatorships operate under the same mask. HOAs, boards, committees, agencies. They look like harmless bureaucracy, but they operate like a test bed for social control, probing your limits, conditioning your behavior, training you to forget your ownership of yourself. They don't need tanks. They use tone. They use peer pressure, fines, paperwork, shame. And when one man, just one, refuses to play along, the illusion crumbles. My victory didn't just reclaim a cabin. It cracked the matrix for everyone around me. Neighbors stopped whispering. They started speaking. One woman removed her approved porch furniture and put up her old OEI,